Today we have chapter 22 of our book Hercufleas. Greta and Hercufleas had just left the town after not a very good speech with the residents, and Hercufleas is just hearing in his head that they're doomed, and the people think that they're doomed and they've got no chance. Here we are, chapter 22. Artifacts picked his way through the woodland, guided by Greta past the seed-shaking rattlesnakes. Once they had to outrun a grizzly squirrel that caught their scent. They headed north, always north. The Tsar's fortress lay somewhere beyond the Sorrows in the frozen waste. Hercufleas tried not to think about where they were going and what he would have to do once he got there. The idea of drinking the drop of black death made him shiver, even more than the increasing cold. He snuggled in the folds of Greta's green scarf, nipping her awake whenever her head nodded down onto her chest. After many hours, even Artifacts was too exhausted to carry on. They took shelter beneath a tree. Hercufleas glanced up at the branches. "Are you sure this one's not hungry?" he asked. But Greta was already asleep, cuddling her axe. All night in her sleep she mumbled about everpines, green giants and gardens of the world. Next day they passed the first of the Sorrows, the great salt lakes where nothing could live. These lay between the mountains like shards of fallen sky. Greta explained how they got their name. It comes from one of the old prophecies. God adds one salty tear to the lakes for every new evil in the world. But the prophecy's end has been lost, so people argue about what happens next. Miss Witz says a day is coming when evil will be gone and life will return to the Sorrows. Mayor Claire says that soon God will add so many tears the lakes will overflow and flood Petrosia with bitterness. Whose ending do you believe? Hercufleas asked. Greta gave a short, bitter laugh. I don't believe in anything. Gradually the landscape changed. The lifeless Sorrows disappeared. Beyond them the everpines grew more sparse until the woodland became a featureless grey tundra. There were still brambleberries for Artifacts to eat, but they were black and sour. Greta dug up particular roots, mashing them into a bitter paste for her supper. But then the trees changed and she no longer knew which ones were safe to eat. And here they are. I think that's them looking at the lake. Can you see them just there? There they are. And they've come through the trees. And there's one of the Sorrows, the salt lakes. They were too far from home. Every evening Greta pricked her finger with a pin, squeezing a drop of blood into a thimble for Hercufleas to drink. It tasted more bitter each time. He felt miserable for hours afterwards. He tried drinking Artifacts' blood instead, but the morning after he woke up squatting on the ground trying to lay an egg, so he stopped. It grew bitterly cold. In the mornings Greta's blanket and scarf was stiff with ice, and Artifacts' feathers glittered with tiny diamonds of frost. Hercufleas woke so frozen he couldn't move. Greta had to cup him in her hands and blow steaming breath like a tiny sauna until his limbs softened. The deeper they went into the waste, the less Greta spoke. Silence layered over her like ice. A scowl froze solid on her face and wouldn't thaw. Hercufleas talked endlessly, trying to break through to her. She just buried her chin in her scarf and ignored him as he chatted about his Fleemily and life before the adventure. It was hard because that had only been one day, so he kept running out of memories. But thinking back to when he was an egg, he remembered all the sounds that had passed through his shell. He remembered hearing Burp and Slurp sneak down to the pantry for midnight feasts, and Tittle, who liked to sing, but would only do it under the kitchen table when she thought no one was listening. Or Dot, who used to talk to him endlessly, trying to convince him that he should hatch out as a girl, not a boy. He missed them all. Just talking about the tall stacks of blood in the pantry or remembering the boingy boing room seemed to make him feel warmer. But nothing could melt Greta. Hour after hour she grew colder. Artifex was suffering too. Since entering the waste, his feathers had faded from white to grey. Not even bits of sugar stick could cheer him now. He was so weak they were barely plodding along. 3 days from leaving Tumba, they saw a black castle in the distance. "That's not it," said Hercufleas. Miss Wits had told them the Tsar's fortress was star-shaped. The castle ahead of them was a square jumble of turrets. But Greta's whoop echoed around the bleak hills, and she spurred Artifex into a gallop. "Shelter!" she cried, her silence cracking at last. "Fires! Food! Maybe even a hot bath!" But the black castle was a deserted ruin. There were signs of a great battle years past, but only vines scaled the walls now, toppling them one by one. "Hello!" called Greta. "Anyone?" A rusty gate screeched as the wind blew it open and shut. Open and shut. Entering the castle's keep, they saw the murder holes above their head. This was one of the Tsar's old castles where he stationed his armies, or perhaps imprisoned his enemies. "We can still shelter here," said Hercufleas. "Keep out of the wind." But something about the place scared Artifex. Cold and shivering as he was, he wouldn't stay inside the keep. Greta said nothing, but that night Hercufleas tasted something fresh and black in her blood. It was despair, and it filled him too. They began to pass more ruined castles, Barbicans and Kremlins and Ostrogs. This was the frozen heart of Petrosia, once the centre of the Tsar's empire. They were so close. That night, out in the waste, was the coldest yet. They huddled together, Hercufleas in Greta's hands and Greta under Artifex's wing, while the boreal winds howled around them like wolves, gnawing at their bones. Above, the aurora shifted from emerald to violet, to colours that have no name and cannot be seen. But neither Greta nor Hercufleas craned their heads skyward to watch, for nothing can be beautiful to those with despair in their hearts. Next morning, drifting in the wind like ghosts, they came upon a frozen lake. It stretched in front of them like a quarry of blue marble. Greta edged Artifex across it, testing the ice with each step. "This isn't like the Sorrows," she whispered. "Something actually lives in here. The nomads that follow the reindeer herds across the waste must stop here. Look." There were old fishing holes in the ice. "We have to catch something," she trembled, stiff fingers unravelling a long ball of twine from her pocket. Twine is like a string. "Artifex won't survive another night on berries and roots, not when it's this cold." Hercufleas looked at the poor bird and saw it was true. Artifex had grown shiveringly thin, with frost dripping from his beak. Prince Zin had bred him for beauty and speed, not for weather like this. "There's just one problem, though," said Greta. "What?" "We need bait." Do you know what bait is if you're fishing? It's something that you can put on the hook or the string so that the fish will bite it and get caught. Why was she staring at him, at Hercufleas? "Oh no!" He jumped backwards, waving his hands. "Me? No, not me. Why me?" "Because you're a fat, tasty bug," Greta said, grinning for the first time in ages. "Relax. I'll tie you to the line, yank out any fish that bites, and cut you from its belly in a flash." She actually wanted him to get swallowed whole. No. No way. He pointed at her satchel. "Use a tinderfly." "I won't." Her grin dropped off her face like an icicle. "They're precious." She scowled. "I'm precious," said Hercufleas. "I only have 5 tinderflies left." "You only have 1 of me. I'm the hero." "Prove it." She laid a hand on Artifex, who gave a miserable cluck and buried his head under his wing. "Do something heroic, something that tells me all this cold and hunger is worth it." She stomped off to sharpen her axe, leaving Hercufleas staring down at the dark hole in the ice. He gulped. What might swim down there? How sharp were its teeth? He pushed the thoughts from his head. Greta was right. If he couldn't face a fish, how could he fight Yuck? Hopping over to the twine, he looped it around his waist, double, treble, super tight. Go on then, he called. Let's go fishing. Greta took up the line. She dangled him above the ice hole. Take a deep breath, she said, and give 3 tugs when you want to come up. Hercufleas nodded as she lowered him down. There was a snapping sound, like when you break a biscuit in two, as he split the thin rime of ice covering the hole. There was a sploshing sound, like when you dunk a biscuit into a mug of tea, as he fell into the black depths of the lake. Oh no, he has decided to see if he can catch a fish for them to eat.